Hello, church family and friends. I'm sitting here today with my good friend Tim Vincent, and Tim has come to share his salvation story with you today. I'm really excited about hearing this. Tim lived in Alaska for 30-some years, and Tim, I want you to tell us about your life in Alaska. Tell us about your journey of faith in Christ, and tell us about the hardships and sufferings you may experience, but also the great experiences you've had with Christ. And tell us a little bit about how you came to learn how to play the guitar so well. And he plays the guitar with us in our praise team. And so just tell us about that musical talent that you received.
Well, that's definitely a gift from God for sure. But started out, my dad was in the Navy down in Virginia, and so I was born there, and then upstate New York till I was about 10, and then we moved to Alaska, and I was 10, almost 11, and that was in 73. And let's see, that was a while back, obviously. Anyway, I hadn't been playing then. Well, I was about 9, I'd expressed some interest, so I got a guitar for birthday or Christmas. I don't even remember. It was just a cheap little thing, and I chinged around on it for a few days, and I hadn't played it in a year or more when we moved to Alaska, so we didn't even take it with us. They just got rid of it, So I ended up running into, we met some people coming up the highway, and then some other people we met. Both of the kids were about my age, and they both played guitar. They were like 11. So I was around 12 when I actually started getting serious about it. And my dad was all into Doc Watson and Earl Scruggs, and I was kind of into some John Denver. So that was kind of my cross of what I started playing the guitar with. Those are my earliest songs. Probably John Denver was my earliest songs that I played, but I was all into Doc and Merle and Earl Scruggs and all that. Anyways, and we lived in Juneau for about a year, caretaking a Boy Scout camp. And Dad would walk out a couple miles. We lived right on the ocean. Remember that now. We lived right on the ocean, and we dug clams and got crabs and just kind of looked after the place, and we got to stay there in one of the cabins for free. And I think I forgot this the last time, but we did have Dad was sitting there at the table one day, and the governor walked through the front yard. He's like, then that was like 74, 75 when we're down in Juneau, and then we came back up the interior, and we ended up going out in like 75 and building the cabin that my dad and Mom, in like 1975, we built that cabin out on the Cosner River, which is about 40 miles out of Manly Hot Springs, which is about 160 miles mostly west of Fairbanks on the highway. So it's the end of the road. And then they lived another 40, we lived another 40 or 45 miles out in the middle of nowheres. No roads. Had sled dogs and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of funny because we moved. One of the reasons we moved to Alaska was my dad and Mom, they were getting kind of concerned. I was getting ready to, not too long ago, to high school, and they were worried about all the red tape and all the drugs and stuff in high school, and they wanted to do homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. So we started homeschooling in like somewhere in there, I don't remember what year, probably 75, because I went to school in public school in Fairbanks for the first year. And then So we were living out, we moved into, there was a bunch of people homesteading out there at the time, and there was only one other, the people we met coming out the highway, there was only one other regular family living up there. The rest of it was a whole bunch of flower children. So we was trying to escape that kind of stuff. We moved right into it out in the middle of nowhere. So I dealt with that, and my folks dealt with that kind of stuff, and they had some go-arounds with some of these people, offering me marijuana and all this kind of stuff, and didn't think much of that, and et cetera. But, and so I lived out there all my teenage years and did homeschooling, and, that was a definite interesting thing. And probably it kind of helped both me and my little brother's really good guitar player in his own right, and kind of a little bit different style, but you didn't have, nobody had phones. We did have a tape deck. We played cassettes, stuff like that. We read a lot of books. For our homeschooling, they had sent us a whole collection of Encyclopedia Britannica or something like that. So we'd sit there grinding wheat for my mom, because she had wheat berries and we ground wheat. Sit there, and I would, I guess, and look at encyclopedia, just flip through it and find out interesting stuff, And that was, I remember, I'll never forget that. It was just learning experience for sure. And I run trap line. That was more in my later teens I started doing that. I was the first one to start running trap line and stuff. My dad kind of got into it later. He didn't want to, he was more concerned about, I'm not into being cruel to animals and stuff, but I wasn't as concerned about it as he was, so he always wanted to have killer traps and snares, and I wasn't as concerned about it, I guess. So I got into it a little sooner than he did. And I probably better fast forward because it'll be there a while. So I spent my teenage years doing homeschooling and living out there on the Cosna, and then I had I moved to town, stayed in town when my folks went back out, and I was probably 18, 19 in there, and I kind of had to figure out my own way there for a while, and sometimes when you're young, you may know your parents are right, but you just kind of got to figure things out for yourself. That's kind of where I was at. And my dad and mom were never drinkers or anything like that, but I was for a few years. Pretty much up until I met my wife. And she was kind of the tool that God used to get my attention, because my dad and mom had both been praying for me. I didn't grow up they weren't Christians. They were good, clean living, didn't drink and smoke and all that, but, we never really went to church or anything, except just occasionally, we had we were friendly with people in church and stuff, but didn't spend a lot of time in church. And my dad was disillusioned with it because he grew up with go through the motions kind of stuff, Methodist spec in upstate New York, it was nothing about relationships, at least in his mind. It wasn't anything about relationship. It was just go through the motions, and he didn't have any interest in that, so my mom was actually the first one of us to get saved. She was always interested in it, but her dad was the same kind of way. He got disillusioned and threw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. And when he was around a lot of Catholics when he was growing up, and seen a lot of really, not trying to slam Catholics, just he just seen a lot of bad stuff back in when he was growing up, and he didn't come around till in his 90s. But he did. Anyway, I remember my dad. I remember I said this last time too. My dad, at one point, one of my guitar heroes is Doc Watson, and he took it upon himself to write him a letter, kind of intervening for me to get things right in my life. And I thought it was a real cool thing at the time, and I still got the letter and everything, but it didn't change my ways at the time. But maybe it was opening the door a little bit, because about a year later is when I met Sherry. So, and we went out for about a year, and it was like, I love you and all that, but we can't go any farther unless you're a Christian, basically, is what it boiled down to. And so I had something to decide. So I decided, well, I'd had one or two kind of what you might call girlfriends over the years, but not really what you call a ladies' man. So they weren't. I'd never really heard that. I never had anybody tell me that they loved me, other than, if they wanted to mess around or whatever, But I knew she was serious, and I was like, I'd be pretty stupid to let this get away, So that's kind of how God hooked me. And I admit I wasn't real. I was a foot dragging type at first, and I'm still not one of those people that just, I still always gotta, if I got a question, I gotta figure it out. I can't just take anybody's word for anything. I guess that's a good thing, And so I decided that I needed to do this, and it's been a kind of a gradual come around. At first, I wouldn't say grace, and I didn't want to get up on stage and play my guitar, and I'm still not real bold. I could be bolder, but and I'm not the one in a big gathering to stand up on a chair and say, "Hey, everybody, we're going to pray." Usually my wife says, "Hey, Tim's going to pray." She's better at that. So, and I don't mind doing that, but at first I wouldn't even do that. I was like, nope. But he's still working on me. I guess we could all say that. But
And now you're serving in our church, obviously the praise team, but your wife Sherry and then daughter Kayla on our praise team, and y'all clean the church. But you also recently have taken on a position with the Morganton Baptist Association. You are the overseer of Camp Morganton, and so God opened up that door for you, and obviously brought you to our church. And we work together at Home Depot. Tell us a little bit about maybe some struggles that you experienced in your life, but also some really neat things God has done for you.
Okay, well, I got a couple examples. One of them is in 1998 we would have had a third. We lost a son when he was 7 months along, and that was a real rough and trying time, for sure. But and I remember people saying, "How in the world do you do that? How do you cope or whatever?" And I don't, to be honest with you, I don't remember really what I said or being real profound or anything. But I just remember people being amazed that you can even deal with, because stuff like that has broken up more than one marriage, I'm sure, you know, just you can't deal with the other person. It's not their fault, but it's just, you can't deal with things yourself, so take it out on your partner or whatever, you know, whatever. But we survived that, and it wasn't easy. Probably harder on Sherry, she carried him for 7 months, and he's still up, well, he's at Birch Hill, which is right above where I worked in Fairbanks, and the church we went to is right next to that. So when I'm in Alaska, I go up and, you know, say howdy and say a few words and put a little car on there or something, you know, just, and I know my mom and dad go over there sometimes too. But anyway, that was some of the rougher stuff, and then there's been lots of good things that weren't so trying. Like, for example, Eric was saying about, we were praying about, Eric brought it to our attention about going to camp, about applying for the position at Camp Morganton for caretaking, and we were praying about it, and we put in for it, and it took a little, seemed like it might have been 2 or 3 months, I can't remember. It took a little while, but we're blessed to be where we're at right now. It's a really beautiful place, and very thankful that we're there. And
well, thank you, Tim, for giving us your salvation story and story how God had worked in your life. Obviously, living out in, we'd probably call it the remote places, the bush of Alaska, and then how God just brought you through and He came after you, and He used Sherry to draw you to Him, and then as you said, Sherry told me that you told her you would never sing in church, play in church, or pray in church, and you're doing all those now and serving in church, and that's how God has changed your life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, church family, I hope you've enjoyed this and it's inspired and motivated you also to tell your salvation story. Have a good and godly day. God bless.